As the world is aware by now, Democratic Congresswoman by the name of Gabrielle Giffords was shot in Tucson, Arizona. Right now, she's in intensive care and is able to respond in a very limited way through what is reported to be hand movements. During this same attack, at least 6 innocent people were killed. Now, the Pima County Sheriff Clarence Dupnick has announced that there have been 6 people killed in the shooting. Among the victims were Chief Federal Judge John Roll, a congressional aide to Giffords, Giffords' Director of Community Outreach, Gabe Zimmerman, and a 9-year-old girl. Dupnick said that at least 12 people had been wounded in the shooting. The shooting only came to an end when 2 men tackled the shooter and held him down. Giffords was struck in the head by a bullet at point-blank range as she attended a public event at a Safeway supermarket in which she was meeting with her constituents. The man the police have in custody as the shooter is Jared Longer, 22, whom the police have described as mentally unstable and possibly acting with an accomplice. Police are currently searching for an older man who was seen speaking with the suspect earlier in the day. U.S. President Barack Obama spoke at a press conference in Washington about the shooting, calling it an unspeakable tragedy. Janet Napolitano, Homeland Security Secretary, issued a statement on the shooting saying, "I am deeply saddened by reports that Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, Chief Judge John Roll, and others were attacked. There is no place in our society or discourse for such senseless and unconscionable acts of violence." Spicer said that Giffords, a Democrat, was seen by Republicans as the one to beat in the recent U.S. midterm elections and was heavily criticized by 2008 vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin. The former Alaskan governor depicted Giffords in a crosshair, among others, indicating that those people needed to be eliminated. The imagery and context that was used by Sarah Palin clearly indicates that she was calling for their assassination. I would like to remind Ms. Palin that advocating the murder of a politician is an act of terrorism under your beloved Patriot Act, and is also called treason, a crime for which you can be executed for. It is a shame the media, and more importantly law enforcement, will not be calling for Sarah Palin to be arrested and charged with terrorism or incitement to violence, as many in the right-wing media like Glenn Beck should. This Congresswoman has been shot by the same increasing terrorist attacks that have been coming out of the right wing. Most notable for the conspiracy theories and hate-mongering on the network, Fox News, is Glenn Beck, who has been responsible for right-wing terrorism before. Brian Williams came to California with hopes of killing employees of the ACLU and the relatively unknown Tides Foundation. He was pulled over by California police and had a shootout, injuring 2 officers. Eric Bohert at the Huffington Post believes that Glenn Beck may have had something to do with it. If not for Beck, it is doubtful that Williams would have ever heard of the Tides Foundation, let alone hate them enough to try to kill them. Indeed, for more than a year, Glenn Beck has been portraying the progressive organization as a central player in a larger, nefarious cabal of Marxist, socialist, Nazi, Obama-loving outlets determined to destroy democracy in America. Beck has routinely smeared the low-profile entity for being staffed by thugs and bullies and involved in the nasty of the nastiest, like indoctrinating schoolchildren and creating mass organizations to seize power. Beck has mentioned the Tides Foundation 30 times on his Fox News show, accusing them of being anti-capitalist, far-left radicals, and indoctrinating children. There are no records of any other talk show even mentioning the Tides Foundation. But there were other indications. Richard Poplawski got in an argument with his mother and she called the cops. When the cops arrived, Poplawski was waiting for them with a bulletproof vest and shot 5 police officers with an AK-47, wounding 2 and killing 3, including an African-American. Poplawski shooting a police officer seemingly had no motive until police looked into his background. Poplawski was a white supremacist who frequently posted on the neo-Nazi, extremely pro-Ron Paul website Stormfront and Alex Jones's New World Order conspiracy theory site InfoWars. Poplawski would post videos of Glenn Beck with Ron Paul talking about FEMA concentration camps onto Stormfront. In the video, Ron Paul would speculate that while there was no evidence of FEMA concentration camps, he still believed that they might come in the future. And there was more. John Patrick Bedell was a Ron Paul-style libertarian who was a member of the Ludwig von Mises Institute, an institute credited as being the driving force for Ron Paul's political and economic philosophies, which was founded and run by Ron Paul's former chief of staff and longtime friend and companion Lew Rockwell. Bedell would post on Ludwig von Mises Institute about how government was criminal. Rockwell refers to the Pentagon as the pentagram, an evil satanic symbol, and subscribes to the John Birch Society New World Order conspiracy theory. Bedell himself is a conspiracy theorist who believed that 9/11 was set up by the government. We could see how the combination of conspiracy theories and anti-government sentiment led to Bedell for taking out his anger on what his hero Lew Rockwell called the pentagram. Finally, Charles Dyer is a man who never committed a violent act against the government, but proudly proclaimed himself to be a domestic terrorist. Dyer was instead arrested on a domestic charge for allegedly raping a 7-year-old girl. While Dyer may or may not be guilty of that charge, he was definitely guilty of possessing a grenade launcher stolen from a U.S. Army base. Police also found residue that led them to believe that he had been storing explosives. Dyer was a member of the Oath Keepers. They're a paramilitary organization comprised of former and current military and law enforcement members. The SPLC has said that the Oath Keepers are concerned about a coming dictatorship, concentration camps, and a general new world order. The Oath Keepers are headed by Stuart Rhodes, a former Ron Paul staffer. They've received support from Glenn Beck, Lou Dobbs, and conspiracy theorist radio host Alex Jones. The incidences of right-wing terrorism are increasing all the time, but it is a small sample of the violent, hateful nature of the right wing and what it has in store for the world. These are people who claim that selfishness and greed are the only way society and economics will function. With these acts having given us a small glimpse of the kind of world they want to live in. Frankly, I am one who certainly wishes not to live in such a world. It's quite clear that the media is trying to cover up the terrorist nature of the right wing. If these attacks had been committed by a Muslim or a black man or even a leftist, they would no doubt be referred to as acts of terrorism. However, since they were committed by a white right-wing man, they are referred to as so-called lone wolf incidences. The hypocrisy is absolutely astounding. Politicians like Ron Paul and media types like Alex Jones and Glenn Beck are as guilty of drumming up paranoia and anger at the American government as Islamic clerics who refer to America as the Great Satan only to see their followers turn to terrorism. Fox News, CPAC, and the Tea Party movement must all be held accountable for the conspiracy theories and anti-government hatred and paranoia that leads people directly into violence. Sheriff Dupnick pointed out the caustic political rhetoric that had consumed the country as he had denounced the shooting. When you look at unbalanced people, how they respond to the vitriol that comes out of the certain mouths and tearing down the government, the anger, the hatred, the bigotry that goes on in this country is getting to be outrageous, the sheriff said. Law enforcement officials said members of Congress reported 42 cases of threats or violence in the first 3 months of 2010, nearly 3 times the 15 cases reported during the same period a year earlier. Nearly all dealt with the health care bill, and Giffords was among the targets. By acknowledging the right-wing links to the shooter, I am in no way denying any possibility of mental illness on the part of Longer. There is no doubt that someone acting alone in such a manner would commit these horrible violent acts with at least a modicum of psychosis. Children are not murdered by a single stranger with a political purpose. Obviously, Longer should be examined by a psychologist before he stands trial. There is a lesson to be learned here about the availability of mental health services in the United States. One could very well argue that the much lower rates of killing sprees in other industrialized nations could be affected by the availability of professional mental health help. Had some sort of program or service been available for longer, this whole tragedy might not have happened. In the very least, some incidences would have been avoided, and those affected could lead better lives. Unfortunately, healthcare in the United States is not intended to serve the needs of human life. It is intended to serve the profit-making of a few elite individuals. The lack of health care to those who need it is a proven sign that the market does not work in providing for human need. This problem and many others like it can only be solved, or at least lessened, by an establishment of a socialist healthcare system.